Hi there. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Total Ramblings. In this episode, we are looking at Series 2, Episode 4 of Andor. This episode is entitled Ever Been to Ghorman? And goes without saying, there are going to be some massive spoilers here. I've literally just finished watching the episode. This is going to be a breakdown of the episode, things that I spotted, and my thoughts on it, basically. As I say, this is episode 4, so we're into the next 3-episode chunk. So at the time of speaking, the next 3 episodes have been released onto Disney+. I am doing them 1 episode at a time. I have not yet seen episodes 5 and 6, so I don't know where this is going. I haven't watched any other reviews or anything, so this is me coming to it totally fresh. So we are 1 year on from the events of the first 3 episodes of this season. And essentially, Bix and Andor are in a safe house provided by Luthen on the planet Coruscant, which is obviously the capital of the galaxy. Bix has been having dreams about the interrogations she was subjected to in season 1, and also dreams about a mission that they've just come back from, where an unnamed or unknown Imperial soldier was killed, because basically, it was him or them, essentially. And the problem is they come back to this safe house every time that they've been away from a mission, and Bix says it's whenever she relaxes that she starts to remember things. Bix and Cassian go off shopping to get their food. They're having to sort of go to different places every time. Andor's a little bit concerned because the particular grocer in this instance remembers them, and they haven't been there for a month. Obviously, there's cameras everywhere. They have to be careful of where they're going because we know that Andor is wanted. Andor is saying to Bix, you mustn't feel guilty about killing this young soldier, because basically we're in a war, even if not everyone kind of believes it yet. And essentially we're getting massive sort of vibes here of, kind of like French resistance type sort of operations behind enemy lines, which kind of leads into the rest of the episode, if I'm honest with you. I'm going to sort of skip ahead. So we have a brief segment with Mon Mothma where essentially, as we saw in the first sequence, there's an Imperial operation underway on the planet Ghorman, where they want a certain mineral extracted for coating reactor lenses, probably for Death Star super laser components. They need vast quantities of this stuff. And they need to mine enough of it from the planet Ghorman that it could upset the very nature of the planet and make it unstable. We have a brief kind of interlude where we see Mon Mothma doing her Imperial Senator thing. Basically, she's trying to get votes because the Emperor's kind of emergency powers, he wants them extended. She's trying to get votes to stop that from happening. She's saying that the planet Ghorman is being persecuted. Crime rates are allegedly going up everywhere. On Ghorman, they've allegedly gone up by 38%. This is clearly some sort of excuse by the Empire to provide a crackdown. But the problem is all the senators she talks to are scared to vote against the Emperor because, they're scared of intimidation. They're scared of reprisals. Essentially, we kind of have a Donald Trump situation here, which is a situation that I'm literally seeing every day in the States right now, where the United States populace, despite having these alleged checks and balances in place to prevent a dictator coming to power, have allowed a dictator to come to power because they're too scared to act against him. He's even arresting judges now. I don't want to go into this kind of thing, but this is very, very pertinent to what's happening on planet Earth right now. The Emperor is so powerful and can instigate such terrible reprisals against somebody that they are afraid to vote against him. So there we go. We also have another interlude on the planet Dakar, where we meet Saw Gerrera's team of rebels. Now, if you haven't come across Saw Gerrera before, Saw Gerrera, this is before the Rebel Alliance. This is before the Rebel Alliance that we see in Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. These are disparate groups of rebels, each doing their own thing. And Saw Gerrera's band in particular are known to be particularly hardcore in that they often commit unspeakable atrocities because they believe that the end justifies the means, and that ultimately, if the Empire suffers, it doesn't matter who else suffers because they want to cause the Empire pain. They're operating X-Wings. They have clearly moved from the base that they had in the last series. And Wilmon, one of the survivors of Ferrix, is there, and he's delivering a device to extract rhydonium, which is basically a starship fuel. It's highly, highly corrosive, can cause terrible effects to the human metabolism. And I have to wonder, in Rogue One, later in the timeline, we see Saw Gerrera, and by this point, he's having to breathe with a mask, he's limping, he's clearly scarred. I'm wondering if there's been some kind of accident with this rhydonium or something like that, because here, in an earlier part of the timeline, he's relatively unscathed. Anyway, those bits are kind of interludes, really. What's really happening in the main part of the plot is we are following Cyril and Dedra, and we go to the planet Ghorman. We are first introduced to the planet Ghorman, where there's like a giant kind of citadel that looks like an old-fashioned sort of star fortress, but a massive city-sized one. And Cyril is there, and he is essentially he's now heading the field office for the Imperial Bureau of Standards. And you see him leave his apartment, and he secures the door discreetly with, or rather leaves a telltale with some sort of thread on the door, and you see him going to work, and there's protesters everywhere, and they're chanting, "Stop the building, stop the Empire." And earlier on in this episode, we had a flashback to episode 1 of this series where it was referenced that a new armory was being built at Palmo. And essentially we discover, well, there's a little bit more talk about this later, and we'll come on to that. There's quite an amusing scene where Cyril is at work being hassled by his mother. She's basically saying, "You've effectively taken a demotion. What are you doing on Ghorman? You were here on Coruscant. You were doing really well. People have fought to work in this building. You had a woman who loved you, as in Dedra. You know, basically, what are you doing?" And he just kind of, this is like a weekly call, and, you know, but we see that people are listening in. There appears to be a group of insurgents or rebels listening in to Cyril's messages. And immediately I thought, well, he knows this is happening. This is clearly some kind of setup, because he says things in the call to his mother that could be described as sympathetic to the Ghorman cause. He says that there's no need for all this rampant anti-Ghormanism, and these people are no threat to the Empire. And because of that, this guy named Rylance and his daughter and their team, they basically think that, hey, maybe they've got an ally here in Cyril, and maybe they could recruit him to their cause, because they believe Cyril to be conflicted based on the communications that they are tapping into. And this is kind of, again, we get a French resistance vibe here, because the Gorm, they speak Gore, and they sound very, very French. I'm pretty certain they're not speaking real French, but everything is in a French accent with French kind of syllables coming out of their mouths, and it's fascinating really to see a new language essentially in Star Wars. Anyway, they contact Cyril clandestinely, and he also discovers that someone's been in his apartment. He's clearly being watched, followed, monitored. They're trying to suss him out, and essentially they don't realise that they are being played by the ISB. This is a classic Imperial Security Bureau operation, because Cyril is contacted by a group called the Ghorman Front, and Cyril, under a pretense of having to go back to the office to pick up some notes, goes to a secret room and contacts Dedra, with whom he is very much still in a partnership with, and she's on Coruscant back at their home, and he's basically, it's finally happened, I've been contacted, I'm going to go to this meeting. And if you recall, Dedra's plan to subjugate Ghorman, or at least find an excuse to do so. So they've got all this propaganda going out around the Empire, discussing, kind of denigrating the Ghor and kind of setting people up so they're anti-Ghor. And she also says we need a radical group of rebels, if you like, to do the right thing as far as we're concerned, to give us the opportunity to clamp down on the planet Ghorman and get what we want out of it. And this is where I think possibly Saul Guerrera's rebel group are going to come into it. I think they're going to be used, and I think there's going to be some kind of massive atrocity on Ghorman, which the Empire is going to blame on the rebellion and give the Empire an excuse to clamp down, relocate all the citizens, and get the mineral calcite that they need, possibly for this Death Star project. That's what I think. Anyway, Cyril attends the meeting of the Ghorman front. There's many hundreds of people there, and essentially everyone is concerned that this new building is a fortress right in the middle of their capital city. They've also been promised that it will not cast a shadow over a particular memorial. Now, if you've watched previous episodes where I've talked about Andor Series 2, I have made reference to the Ghorman massacre before. Now, I believe in Star Wars Legends, which was the EU, which became Star Wars Legends when Disney took over, I believe there were a couple of different stories told about the Ghorman massacre. One of them was that Governor Tarkin landed a spaceship on a group of protesters. And here there is reference made to the Tarkin massacre, where allegedly Tarkin killed 5,000 Gorms on the plaza, which is possibly the Ghorman massacre that we might be talking about. But I also still think we're leading up to another possible Ghorman massacre, and maybe they're going to kind of get the two of these stories and make it that they're both accurate. Or that was the Ghorman massacre and it's not as important as we're led to believe. But I don't think that can be the case, because I definitely think we're leading up to a big pivotal moment in the foundation of the Rebel Alliance. And I think we're leading up to another Ghorman massacre. But it's interesting. We've already had one in the past, apparently. Anyway, the Empire promised that they'd never build a building that would cast a shadow over the memorial to this massacre site. And, well, that's what they're doing, basically. Meanwhile, kind of parallel to this, we attend an ISB briefing, and Major Partagaz, the head of the Imperial Security Bureau, or this particular office of it at least, is having a go at all the members there, basically saying, we need to keep up the tempo here. This is not how you run an effective counterinsurgency. And, we need to work on amplifying the intake process of prisoners. And already the staff are saying they don't have time to process the prisoners that they've got. There's too much going on. They can't keep up. Dedra, meanwhile, having seen to have been demoted to the Ghorman, or been demoted from the Axis desk, is of course very interested that there have been movements on the Axis desk. The Axis desk being the department or the division dedicated to hunting down Andor and other rebels. Of course, she's very interested in finding Andor. And we see lots of kind of insight here into how the ISB works and infighting. And this is kind of my favourite kind of Star Wars material. Perhaps my favourite Star Wars scene from Star Wars, the very first film, is the scene aboard the Death Star, where the Imperial top brass are arguing amongst themselves about how best to handle the rebellion. One person saying they're better equipped, more well equipped than you realise. Someone else has the arrogance to say, no, they couldn't possibly touch us. And it's that kind of... The Empire is not a monolithic entity. There are different groups within the Empire who are each trying to possibly to pursue their own agendas. They have their own viewpoints on things. They don't always agree. And we see a lot of this here and in the ISB kind of scenes. Lonnie, who is Luthen Rail's mole within the ISB, makes contact with Luthen and says, I've basically found out that Dedra has been in charge of Ghorman for the last year, and she's running an operation there, but I don't know to what end. And it's being kept quiet. And basically, she's been off of Axis for a while. It's perceived as a demotion, but clearly there's something big going on, and hiding what she is doing is part of, keeping the whole thing kind of secret, really. That's kind of the setting the stage. Basically, Andor is called by Luthen to say, I want you to go to Ghorman and find out what's going on there. Andor doesn't want to go necessarily, particularly without his partner Bix, but he does leave. And the final scene, Bix is on her own in the apartment, and it would appear that she's a spice addict. And one can only assume that this is not going to end well for Bix or for Andor and Bix's relation in general. So, yeah, I said before, this is gutter level Star Wars. But apart from the scenes, the brief interlude with Mon Mothma, we are really, really, really down at sub-basement street level here, literally, where we see Lonnie meeting Luther in the very depths of the oldest parts of the city planet of Coruscant. These are people on the edge trying to survive. So, obviously in the Star Wars films, we kind of see the galactic soap opera side of things, with vast planets being, Death Stars being blown up and emperors and Sith Lords and what have you. And this is how it's affecting people at street level. And it's brilliant. This is the best kind of Star Wars. It's the kind of Star Wars I love. I love all kinds of Star Wars. Don't get me wrong. There's a place for Jedi and Sith and lightsabers and Star Destroyers and admirals and all that kind of thing. There's a place for that and massive galactic battles. But there's also a place for this kind of level where you kind of see how people are surviving day to day and how they are coping under the reign of the Empire. And this episode, very, very slow and kind of packed with loading you up with information as to what's going on, but necessary. And I suspect, obviously, we're going to get, I would suspect, not obviously, but I suspect we're going to get a lot of action in the next couple of episodes because we've only got 2 more in this particular block. So there we go. Those are my thoughts on episode 4 of Andor series 2. I am trying to watch 1 episode a day, so I will probably be watching 1 episode tomorrow, which for me is Friday, the 2nd of May, and I will try and get another episode out, and then I'll be watching an episode probably again on the Saturday. Like I say, I'm not reading anything about this, I'm not watching any other YouTube reaction videos, and I am doing this review straight off the back of watching it. So, there you go. Loving this series, loving the grittiness of it. It feels like a spy thriller, a war film. It kind of, it's interesting. Complete lack of stormtroopers in this episode, for example. This is yeah, it's interesting. And I love this. I love this kind of way of looking at Star Wars. Anyway, it's enough from me burbling on. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Total Ramblings. I hope to see you in the next episode, which will probably be the next episode of Andor. I've got some other stuff going on around the house, so I'll do another life update at some point. Please do all the usual YouTube-y stuff, like, subscribe, comment, share, blah-de-blah-de-blah, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.